Hello, today we have a chemistry paper 1 exam question. This is from structures and bonding, the structure and bonding topic. This is from the combined science paper, but this is relevant for triple science as well. This is from a higher paper. All this content is needed for foundation and higher. So this question is about structure and properties. Which pair of substances both contain atoms in hexagonal rings? That is fullerenes and graphene. Fullerene is another allotrope of carbon, and it's made from carbon. Those carbon atoms are arranged in hexagonal rings as they are in graphene. Explain why the structure of copper allows the conduction of thermal energy. So we have to talk about the structure of copper, how it allows the conduction of thermal energy. So in copper and in all metals, the electrons around the atoms can delocalize, so they can become delocalized, which means they can move freely through the structure. Because they can move freely through the structure, the metal, they can then transfer energy. They can also conduct electricity in the same way, but they can transfer energy as they move. So let's say that copper contains delocalized electrons. Those delocalized electrons can move through the structure or the metal. We could say metal or structure. As they move, they transfer the energy. Okay, so the first mark here is for saying that they contain delocalized electrons. The second mark here is for saying that they can move through the structure. And the third mark is for saying that they transfer energy as they move. Over the page, explain why copper oxide has a high melting point. Copper oxide is an ionic compound, which means that it is made up of oppositely charged ions. So those oppositely charged ions are formed when copper donates electrons, so it becomes positive. Oxide receives electrons, so becomes negative. So those oppositely charged ions are very strongly attracted to each other, but also to all the other ions around them in 3 dimensions. So you get this lots of strong forces of attraction. We call those electrostatic forces. So let's start to put some ideas down. Strong electrostatic forces of attraction between those oppositely charged ions. Okay, and these strong forces of attraction, they need a lot of energy to break them. So those forces of attraction are the ionic bonds. Those ionic bonds take a lot of energy to break them, which is why we'd need a lot of energy to melt it if it was a solid. So that's why it has a high melting point. A lot of energy is needed to break these ionic bonds. And then the last question in this, explain why water has a low melting point. Where copper oxide is an ionic compound, water is a covalent compound, which means that the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms are covalently bonded together. Because it's water, it's a simple covalent compound. So it's kind of like this, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. So it's very small, it's simple, it's not like diamond, which is a very large covalent compound, a giant one. Very simple one. So these are very small molecules. And if we represent each one of those molecules as a circle here, between those molecules, there are intermolecular forces which are very, very weak. So they do exist. There's a very small force of attraction. We call those intermolecular forces. They are very easily overcome. They're not broken because they're not bonds. They're easily overcome. So it doesn't require a lot of energy to overcome those forces, break the molecules apart, and then turn it either from a solid into a liquid or from a liquid to a solid. This point, liquid into a gas, I'm sorry. This would be from solid to liquid. So in a solid, the molecules would be arranged like this, in rows. It wouldn't take a lot of energy to break them apart, overcome those forces. Let's get some of these ideas down. So water exists as a small molecule. Because of this, there are very weak forces between the molecules. or use the correct term, intermolecular forces. So weak intermolecular forces between the molecules. And then the third mark here is for saying that very little energy is actually needed to overcome those forces. And that is why it has a low melting point. All right, I hope that helps.